Welcome to Shakin, where we provide the platform for entrepreneurs and thought leaders to share their stories in order to hopefully influence others to get out of the rat race and chase their own dreams. If you have any recommendations for guests or questions that you want to be asked, please don't hesitate to reach out. Anyways, if you enjoy the podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, and share in order to keep the podcast growing. Otherwise, I'm your host, Jack Moran, and this is Shakin' Hands.
I'm currently a life, relationship, and executive coach. My business is niche down into relationship, but I'm just about to close that brand and move more towards leadership. So I'm like kind of at my final hurrah for my relationship stuff, which I love and I've done for 20 years in different kinds of modalities. And I'm deeply passionate about it, but the enthusiasm has started to kind of go in a different direction here.
Yeah, as entrepreneurs, like our interests shift for sure.
Oh, I mean, I've started so many businesses and projects where I like pour my heart and soul, then I do it for a handful of years and then move on to the next.
So is this next project the one you mentioned off air when we were talking about the link or whatever?
No, that's the one I'm closing down just now.
Okay, so what's
My final hurrah.
Let's start with that. So
Yeah, so I backstory, like I grew up as a tomboy and then also had my activist and feminist stage. And then at one point I remember reading a book by Osho where he spoke about how the feminine liberation movement is a bunch of bullshit and that it's actually women oppressing themselves because they're demanding equality through their masculinity and not their femininity. And I didn't even know about masculine and feminine at that point. And so kind of caught me off guard and I was like, oh no, there's a point to this. And I have such a vivid memory of that moment. And that sort of started a whole exploration around what does it mean to be feminine? And I had so many questions because I saw descriptions of this in the religious settings, which felt pretty dogmatic and oppressive. And then I saw it in the Tantra settings, which felt pretty fluffy. And I am a practical, grounded person. And so I wanted to understand what does this look like in the modern world where there is this thing of equality that's here, that this isn't going to be sort of fluffy or oppressive in any way. And I went and started studying men and women on our brain structure, on our hormones, and how all of these things are impacting us and how we show up and how we relate. And so I've created courses to understand one for men, one for women. I first initially did the women because I was speaking to people like me who are kind of women that are strong and they're masculine go-getters. And, you know, we might unintentionally be emasculating our men. And it was a whole journey for me that shifted everything in my life. How I show up as a coach, as a teacher, as a partner. And I wanted to lead other women down that same path. And so just becoming aware of the ways that we are unintentionally or sometimes intentionally emasculating our men and the impact that that's having like on a biological level. And then after I created the women's program, I was like, well, I just kind of contributed to the very problem I'm trying to solve. Because now women have this information of how to handle a relationship and they go to their partner and they're like, here's what you need to do. And I was like, nah. So then I decided to run a men's program. And I thought I would just be able to flip the information around and be like, okay, guys, well, here's how your biology works. Here's how her biology works. And no, that was not the case. Like as I went into it, I'm really cautious around my own blind spots because of being a woman. And I think a lot of therapists and coach and mothers and wives and well-intentioned women are out there giving advice to men based on what works for women, especially around their emotions and how they should handle their emotions and communication and all of this stuff. And so I had to do a lot more research, like research by talking to men and talking to clients, and also like in the books of just really understanding men beyond my own biases. And so then I crafted the men's program, and I think they also need different tools to be able to hold the space in a relationship in their masculinity and how to help the woman get into their feminine. So that program ended up being something completely different than I thought it was going to be when I started it.
yeah, and it's like this is something that I'm actually really interested in. And it's crazy because like there isn't like an insane historic log on the like behavior of or the breakdown of a woman, because a lot of times it was written by a man.
Yeah.
Until like the 19th century, right? Is that correct? Like when people like Anais Nin started like writing, about sexualization like through the female's eyes, which is like groundbreaking.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult thing to study. What are the like key components that you have like differentiated between men and women? What are those like?
Well, first, so I speak in a generalization, and as a disclaimer for that, because I'll go a lot into the brain structure, which is not black and white, especially the way that we're evolving. Like, I'm going to be developing parts of my brain that are going to resemble more of like a masculine brain, and vice versa. And so, more I present, these are the two different temperaments, and figure out which one works for you, because there's some relationships where the woman might fit more into the masculine tendencies and man might fit more into the feminine, especially if she's dismissive, avoidant, and he's anxious. Then I notice those patterns play out more there. But I would say like a big one that has been really helpful for people to understand is around how we handle emotions differently. So in our brain, we have two centers. Both of us have it. So we have the MMS, the mirror neuron system, and the TPJ, the temporal parietal junction system. A bit of a mouthful. And women generally will default to the MMS, which means we feel our emotions, the empathy of it. That's why we also want to talk around our emotions, which is also another thing that I'll speak to. And men will more use the TPJ, which means they're going to analyze their emotions. So men will want to talk about a problem if they're ready to fix it. Whereas like we'll talk about a problem as a way to connect, as a way to de-stress. And that's also why we'll be like, hey, you're feeling really emotional. Why don't you talk about it? And to talk about it just to share is going to increase your oxytocin and estrogen. It's not going to make you feel better, because if your cortisol is high, those hormones don't bring it down. In order to bring your cortisol down, you need testosterone to go higher, and that will bring your cortisol down. Whereas in my body, cortisol is going to come down when my oxytocin and my estrogen goes up. So if I talk and you listen, then I'm going to feel really good. And so that hormonal shift is going to happen, but also we're using my MMS. I'm getting to talk, and there's empathy and there's feeling. And so I'm processing my emotions. So men, however, come in and they're like, well, let's just break it down. Like, what's the problem here? Let's solve it. The whole thing of like men always want to fix the problem and they're not listening. Well, that's because that works for them. And they have a hard time understanding, like, how are you going to feel better if you just talk about your problem and you don't solve it? Or like, there's a really easy solution here. And so with men, I'm always like, guys, feelings first, facts later. Like first empathize, build the bridge, help her to regulate just by talking and feeling heard. Then she's going to have a hormonal balance where then she might be able to better hear the analysis or the solution at that point.
And I've definitely dealt with that in relationships, like taking that very like concrete, sequential, like pragmatic approach to like hearing feelings, which isn't received really well. Like going through the like, okay, well, psychologically, like blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, you're just an asshole, which I'm not trying to be, but it's interesting that you're saying this, because like it's just like my tendency. Like I'm taking like that pragmatic approach. How do you see like, and so I know you talked about there's like the masculine and the feminine. So can men lean more feminine and then women lean more masculine in some of these situations?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say the biggest way that I can predict that is around attachment styles. Are you familiar with attachment styles? So there's this thing called attachment style theory, and there's anxious and dismissive. There's one in between that's kind of a combination of the two, and then there's secure attached. And dismissive people are more cut from their emotions, their own emotions and the other person's emotions. They're more creature comforts, and anxious people are really for the contact. They're not really great at self-soothing. They often need their partner to help them to soothe. So like if we were in a relationship and I was anxious and you were dismissive and we have a fight, like I'm going to want to talk and you're going to probably want some space. So that's just one scenario where that shows up. But I have seen when the woman is dismissive, she has more masculine tendencies in regards to what I'm talking about here.
So how do you like resolve those if you have two polarizing personalities? Someone that's leaning a woman that's leaning extremely feminine and a man that's leaning extremely masculine. How do you have a relationship? Like how do you smooth out that polarity?
You take my course.
Okay.
No, but I think because so often our differences, because we're different, we misinterpret each other. So when you act a certain way, then I'm like, well, if I did that, this is what I would be thinking and feeling if I acted that way. So then I project those interpretations onto you. And I have found when women can, and men, vice versa, can start to understand. And this is why I like the biology behind it, because we get to address the misunderstandings and the misinterpretations. And when people have an understanding, this is how men function, this is how women function, they stop judging it. They start, because they now understand it, so they accept it and they even honor it. And then it becomes this beautiful dance between the masculine and feminine, because you understand how each person works, either how they process their emotions, how they process stress, how they communicate, why they do it that way. And we quit judging each other. So we quit judging women for being too emotional or irrational, or for men being uncommunicative or all about sex, or these kinds of things. Like, I'll take this and I'll go into emotions, I go into communication, I go into sex and intimacy, what makes us feel connected. So I break it down in all of these different areas. Sometimes it fits man, woman, but sometimes it's a reverse polarity. It still just helps to understand the other and accept it and work with it.
Is this most of the time used in like a sexual romantic relationship, or could it also be used in like a business sense when you have a...
All of it. Yeah. I love that you asked that question. I had one man go through my program and he was like, not only do I feel better in the dating world, and because I have singles and couples come through my programs, but he was also my relationship with my housemate, who is a woman, my cousin, my grandmother, my mother. I had one woman go through it and she was like, I feel like I just healed my relationship to the masculine for her previous relationships, for her father, stuff from her childhood, because she understands him from another perspective now. And I've definitely felt that for myself as well in this, because there are certain interpretations that I put onto my childhood or to my present day interactions. And it has healed that. I also have had people use this in the work context. I work with a lot of CEOs or senior executives, and when they start to understand their team better, then it has helped them to be able to how to relate to them, how to communicate to them in a way that's more effective.
And so in the beginning, you talked about like kind of awareness being the first step, which you gave some of the science like behind what's going on. What is like the next step to like change? Like, what is the practice that leads to like change and results in a smoothed out relationship between two polarizing personalities?
Okay, well, let's see. So some practices at the end of the day, let's say, I have the stress of the day, you have the stress of the day. When you come home, I generally recommend that men take kind of a transition period. And I recommend this for women too, if they've really been in their masculine, to be able to get into their feminine, but it's going to look a little different.
Interesting.
And so when a man comes home, he's kind of depleted, and then he goes straight into, she wants to talk, she wants to connect, and he's just like, oh my God. And he's either like not focused, not paying attention, not patient, not empathetic. Like, she's not going to get his best self.
This is resonating with me for sure.
Okay, great.
I have experiences.
Okay. So I then recommend the guy takes 10, 20 minutes, whatever the time schedule allows, whether like dinner's going on the table or the kids are needing help or whatever it is. So take 10 minutes, take 20 minutes, go do your thing, whatever revives you. So whether that's reading a book, going on a walk, just sitting and doing nothing, or playing a video game, and then come back and connect. And ideally, when you first come home, you go and you connect to your woman. So you get a moment of contact and you say, hey, I'm going to just go do my 10-minute period or whatever. And then you come back and you make that contact. So you're getting what your body needs. And again, sometimes it's switched. Like, I've also worked with gay couples and there's still a masculine feminine dynamic that this is also applied to.
Interesting.
And then for the woman, like, because her stress levels are there, she's probably going to get contact through communication. So you're like, hey, tell me about your day. And so you get her to talk about her day, and especially the emotional content of it, and just get her talking, because it's kind of like the words that come out, the stress is like literally coming out, and you're just sitting there holding a trash can and catching it. And so that's going to help her to feel better, and that's going to help her to feel connected.
What about like, this sounds like it's like in like an established relationship. What about like when you're dating or like making a connection with someone from the beginning, from both sides, from the female side and from the masculine side? Like, what are the kind of key concepts of connecting in those early stages? Is it the same or is it different?
At the very early stages, because there you're just getting to know each other. Are we talking like first couple of dates?
Yeah, like even like approaching.
Approaching. I mean, that's tough in the modern world too, because I still love it like when a man approaches and takes that initiative. But I think that women have not made that. We've made it a lot harder. We're a lot more harsh and judgmental. Like in talking to guys in the dating world, they're like, one woman wants dinner, another woman wants drinks, another woman wants coffee, and another wants walk. And if you suggest one of those, not the other, then you get in trouble. So it's kind of like every woman is so different around what she wants and what's acceptable and not acceptable for her. And women are sometimes like penalizing men and shaming them. Like, no, I'm not going to go out for drinks with you. I don't even know you. Like, let's do coffee. And it's like, just give an A for effort if you could. So I think like sometimes women aren't understanding the vulnerability that men are in. One, in taking an initiative, and two, just like what it's like to be a man right now in modern days. I think that there's not so much of an understanding, or no, maybe there is, but I think that we could do a lot better of, instead of complaining about I want a man in his masculine, of understanding that in order to get that, you need to be in your feminine. So when I hear women be like, there's no conscious men around, I'm like, well, if you are saying that, then there's something also to be looking at, because we attract the people that are in resonance of us. So if you're not attracting conscious men, then, what's going on for you? Because there's sometimes women are blind to their own aspects of how they're not in their feminine. And a lot of women are trying to get men into their masculine by being in their masculine. Like, I'm going to tell you what to do and how to be in your masculine. That is never going to work effectively.
What does that actually look like, though? Like, what are the like characteristics or patterns that a woman would be doing that is putting her in her masculine?
So constantly being in do mode, taking the lead, having a lack of patience, criticizing the lead, expecting mind reading, and then when the man takes an action, be like, why would you do that? Or also even just to be like, hey, you're the man, take initiative, like you decide, and start to criticize in a very sharp, direct way. I think that there's a much more gentle and feminine way to approach these things.
Okay, so like taking the lead, for instance, I feel like some girls would argue like, they want to be that doer. Are you just saying that like if you want to attract the masculine, then you have to retreat into this or to be more feminine? Or do you think just all women are better off being more feminine?
I think it's going to be a personal preference for how somebody wants to be.
What their outcomes they want.
And and also the kind of relationship that they want. Like, I'm a woman that has a very strong masculine. I'm very ambitious. Like, I get shit done. I'm a doer. But I also want to be mindful of the kind of relationship that I want. I don't want to be in my masculine and like making all of the decisions in the relationship. And I move really fast and I think really quick. So I need to slow down and create space if I want my man to take the lead. And so also, because women can sometimes multitask or switch from task to task easier. Could give you the whole brain science behind it if you wanted.
Go ahead. This is very interesting to me. So I really like the psychological stuff. So
yeah, well, I mean, we have a larger corpus callosum, so we can more easily connect between the two hemispheres, or communicate between the two hemispheres of our brain.
Women can?
Women can.
Okay.
We also have more dopamine and a couple of other qualities of our brain that allow us to be able to do that. And so, like, there was one time I was at the airport with my partner, and we needed to take care of a couple of things, and we wanted to get some food, we wanted to go to the toilet, we wanted to do something with the baggage, we wanted to go to a shop, and I'm running through going like, okay, and he was just kind of chasing after me, trying to keep up with me, and he's like, this is so emasculating right now, like I'm just like trying to keep up with my woman, whereas like I just needed to breathe and slow down, and then he would have been able to like more take the lead, or not just feel like he was trying to keep up with me. And sometimes because our brain might function a little bit quicker, and not all the time, like sometimes the roles are reversed. I've definitely worked with couples where men are more how I just described, and the woman's in a different temperament. If the woman is like this, slow down, create space, ask questions, get curious, give the man the information he needs to succeed. So that's another big thing. And also in the dating, like so often I think men fail, whether it's in dating or relationship, just due to lack of good information.
Do you think that there is a time where, or how do I phrase this? Is the result of the conflict ever that you're just with a bad partner? Or do you think that there's like always a common ground that you could find to make a relationship work?
No, I don't think that you should make every relationship work. For me, the success of a relationship is not necessarily staying together and longevity. I just ended a 13-year relationship that was a good relationship, but I had changed. We were quite different. We learned a lot. We grew a lot from our differences. We made them work in such a way where they enhanced each other. And then also, I think the best thing for us to do, this was a year ago or so, that was to go separate ways, just to acknowledge, like, if we were to continue to make this work, we would both be compromising. And I didn't want him to compromise, and I didn't want me to compromise to the extent that we would, to be able to have a really fulfilling relationship. And so I'm not necessarily going to say bad, that there's a person that is bad, because you called that person in. For your subconscious calls them in quite often because it wants to heal something, and there's a partnership there that you can grow from. Now, depending upon the level of woundedness, you will experience a level of toxicity or not. But somebody might just not be a good fit for you. But what I like to try to encourage people to do and give them the tools is, why did I call this person in? How can I grow? What can I learn? How can I be a better partner here? To put those things into practice. And if your partner doesn't match you, and continue to put those same kind of efforts towards healing the relationship and each of your temperaments, then to say, like, hey, this isn't working, and to go your separate ways. And if that's the case, you've done all of this work to heal and change, that the next relationship you call in is already going to be at another level, and match you at that level. So nothing's lost. There's no time wasted, because you healed and then you called in something better the next time.
What about for someone who's like, I don't even know what I'm looking for? Like, how do you define a good partner, or like set those boxes that you want to check when you're looking for a partner?
I have a couple exercises that I do with people for this. One is what I call the 5 non-negotiables. So I'm like, what are 5 things that you think your partner must have in order for you to want to be in relationship with? And you can only have 5. So it helps people to get in touch with what's most important. I'll also do a values exercise of where I have them list out their top 10 relationship values, and then I work with them in that in a certain way. And another exercise is I'll be like, okay, what is it that you want in a partner? And this can be as long of a list. And sometimes a lot of people are oriented towards what they don't want. So they're like, well, I don't want somebody who does this, 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 or this. So then I have them write that on a piece of paper on the left-hand side. And then, okay, what's the opposite of that? What's the positive side of that? And so then they start to make that list, because you want to speak to what you want, not what you don't want.
Right.
And once they have that list, then I have them go and sit with a friend or somebody, or me, if we're in a session together. And then I go, how well do you match this? So you want somebody who's emotionally intelligent. Where's your emotional intelligence? Where do you lose your composure? How do you handle your emotions? How do you handle yourself when there's conflict? And so we start to look at that, because there's times where people will project onto their partner, like, I want somebody who's productive, who sees the day, who goes out and get it. And then, they're hitting snooze 10 times and not following through with their own commitments to self. So it's like, you're going to call somebody in that's going to match you. And if you've had 5 men that have the same pattern, the man is not the problem. You're the common thread. So change yourself, and then the people coming into your life are going to change.
So if someone so you want someone that matches you.
You will get somebody that matches you. That's just how things work.
Gotcha. So then it all starts with kind of like changing yourself if you want to change the way your partners are.
Yeah, if you want to change, if anything that you want to change in your life, whatever's coming to you, you are the common thread. I think that we're like this magnet, and we're pulling people in. A lot of it is unconscious. It's emotions that we've oppressed. It's core beliefs that we took on when we were 2, 3, 4 years old that we don't even know that we have. But we can see that we have them because of what's happening in our life. Whatever it is, whether it's with your work or it's with a relationship, it's with friends, whatever patterns are playing out, you don't blame the outside and try to control the outside, which is, you can. A lot of people do. It's just not effective.
Exactly. Yeah, and you kind of use people like as like a mirror almost to like define yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, you're right. It's like an external representation of yourself, and you're going to see the things inside them that you see in yourself.
Yeah.
So when you talked in the beginning about the, or before we got on the podcast about this like program that you're doing that is now going to be the end of the relationship business, what is that program?
So I'm first going to run a free challenge just for couples to come in to call it Ignite Love. So we're going to go through just the different temperaments that are out there around emotions, around communication, around intimacy and connection. So I'm going to be putting out some videos there and then just do like a live Q&A. And then all following that, I'm going to have my women's program, which is, I mean, initially I designed it for women that are more in their masculine and how to get more into their femininity and really honor and respect and uplift their man and their masculine. But I've also had women come through it who were really in their feminine, kind of more emotional, more chaotic, because in my coaching, I bring a lot of tools. So I'm a very practical person. Like I have a therapeutic and coaching background, which can be really helpful in doing some of the deeper work and deeper healing that's needed. As you can hear, I'm always like, go in, because it's resonant in here of what it is that you're calling in. So like there was one woman who her relationship, they had just pressed pause because he's like, your emotions are way too chaotic. Like I can't be responsible for all of this. And she went through the program and she learned the tools on how to get clarity around what she was feeling, why she was feeling it, and how to work on it instead of always projecting it onto him and then making him responsible for her to feel better. And in that, she also just really learned about how to honor him and his masculinity. And they got back together by the end of the program. So it really can speak to both. And I have singles and couples that come through it. So that's the women's one. And then the men's program is kind of the reverse side of like how to be in your masculine, but also how to support your woman to be in your feminine, which a lot need. Like there's so many women that are more in their masculine now for various reasons. And the relationship dynamics often perpetuate it. And so for a man to really understand how to support his woman and getting her into her feminine is some of what's there. And then I also have over a decade in my background around teaching sacred sexuality. So I'll bring some of that in, especially into the men's program. I bring a lot of
Is that
that in there.
Kama Sutra or something like that?
I mean, I don't go into Kama Sutra there, but I have studied things of the Kama Sutra. The Kama Sutra is a lot more of like sexual positions and things like that. But I will teach about opening up our sexual energy and being able to channel it and work with it. So for women, it can be opening up to different kinds of orgasms. So a lot of women, if they do orgasm, they only orgasm from the clitoris, which is great, but there's so much more pleasure that is available. And that orgasm very much mimics a masculine orgasm, like more of like an ejaculation. And in both of those, we're losing energy. And if people can learn how to maintain their sexual energy and to move it, there is just
It's powerful.
so much, so much powerful every aspect of your life. Like I physically have seen people change when they start to access their sexual energy and maintain it and contain it and move it in different ways. Their physical appearance changes, their work changes, like just everything in their life.
Probably their aura changes a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I speak about some of those things in my programs. Like I don't really lead with the sacred sexuality stuff, but it's always a tool that I have in my back pocket when needed.
So not to go on too much of a tangent, but how do you, that's very interesting to me because this is something that's been an intellectual pursuit for me recently. How do you not release that energy in a sexual, encounter and fuel that energy?
Yeah.
And continue to utilize it?
For men and women, it's a little bit different. For men, it's learning to not ejaculate. And so
for men, that's the answer?
That's part of the answer. Yeah. Or to ejaculate less, like how to control the ejaculation. The orgasm comes before the ejaculation, but it's only a couple seconds before. So most people think that it comes together, like an ejaculation is an orgasm, and that's not the case.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So it's men, like a boxer learns to, when a fist is coming at his face, to not blink. Most of us are going to blink. Mm-hmm. So a man in this training learns when he has the orgasm to not have the reflex of ejaculating. So he learns to separate the two, just like the boxer learns to not blink when there's a fist coming at his face.
Is that like an exercise that you learn how to do that, or
there's different techniques?
That seems like you have to be pretty strong to like make that happen.
I've heard it's difficult.
I can imagine that might be different though.
But I've also met men that do it intuitively because they feel the exhaustion that happens. They feel the depletion that happens.
For sure.
And they don't want that. And that because they can feel the disconnect that it causes from their partner. They fall asleep. And men are likely to fall asleep afterwards anyways, because in making love, there's an increase of oxytocin and that makes you guys sleepy.
Yeah, for sure.
But So that could be there anyways. But in regards to the non-ejaculation, yeah, there's a handful of different techniques to practice. There's some in the Tantra realm, there's some in the Taoist realm. So there's different paths where you can learn to do it as well. And, I know some men that don't ejaculate at all. And I know others that will choose to do it maybe once or twice a month. And they just feel so much more vital. Their mind feels more sharp. They feel more creative. They've got more energy. Like there's a whole lot more ambition for everything. More presence.
It's funny because we were literally having this conversation before the podcast today. And it's like crazy that I always say like sex is the worst part because it's like you build up all this like dopamine and this like you have this like energy when you're pursuing a girl, and then the second, like you said, you ejaculate, like you lose all of that energy, and it's like it's very unfulfilling. So it's interesting that you say that because that was just like an intuitive thought for me. I didn't know that was an actual thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's several hormonal things that are happening too. Like if a woman, and I wish it wasn't this way. I feel like God really did not design things so well on this, whoever God is. But like if a woman goes into sex too soon, it decreases the vasopressin in men, and vasopressin is a very similar hormone to testosterone, and it can, if his vasopressin is down, it can influence the level of attraction and interest that he has. So there is something to holding out, even just like on a hormonal level.
Wow, that is so interesting.
That one landed. We got two. Wow.
No, that's crazy. Like I did not know. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Like that's definitely like something that consciously happens as a guy. Like, but I didn't know that there was like a hormonal science behind that.
Yeah, and then you add ejaculation on top of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, even without the ejaculation, like that will often happen in non-ejaculating men as well. Not as much. The ejaculation will amplify it.
So this all this information is going to be a course that's available at some point in time soon.
Yeah, it's actually the last time I'm going to run it. So I'm going to run my women's program and then my men's program, and then I'm retiring that part of my business to move on to something different. And so this is like a lot of that's in there, especially in the men's program. And then they have live group coaching calls with me, and we also have a platform where they ask questions. So much more comes out there through the questions and the nuances of everything that people are asking. Like, I mean, I've run tons of workshops around the sacred sexuality stuff, so I have a lot of information there. I packed as much as I could into the training around the women's orgasms, around the ejaculation control, around the differences between the masculine and feminine type of sexuality as well, because I think there's some things there that, to give you an example, like a lot of, and again, just generalized differences. I really encourage people as they go through the program to like figure out, does this work for you? Is this how you function? And then if so, communicate it to your partner. And that's especially helpful for men because sometimes like they are that way, but they don't necessarily have the words to wrap around it and communicate it. So often when men go through my program, they're like, oh my God, this is making so much sense. Kind of like how you're like, yes, I can't wait to go tell my partner this. And so
I'm enlightened now.
Just like giving you guys the words to so that you can translate that to your partner. But one example of just like around feminine, masculine, different types of sexuality is like women, our bodies are going to be so good at the more that you build the oxytocin. The more oxytocin we have in our body, the more pleasure we're going to have, the better orgasms we're going to have. But in order to build oxytocin, you need to like sexual touch without an agenda, or in just like to tease. And so like don't go straight for the erogenous zones, and which so many men will. They'll go straight to the breast, they'll go straight to the pussy. And really what you want to do with a woman's body quite often is to like tease it and warm it up. Whereas like there was one time where I was doing that for my partner. I was just like teasing him, and I'll just like brush my hand over. He grabbed my hand and he like put it on him, and he's like, just stay. I was like, oh my God, this is that moment. This is a moment where I'm doing to you what I want on my body.
That's hilarious.
And I was like, oh wow. I mean, I love getting to see those moments where I'm like treating him how I want to be treated, and it is so not what he wants.
Yeah, and so for anyone who's listening to this, we're gonna link like put the link up for that program, and I might even utilize that. It could be beneficial in my life. But so you said now you're transitioning into like a more of a leadership coaching role, is that correct?
Yeah, it's looking like that.
What's the reason for that transition? Just a new intellectual pursuit, or you're bored with the last one, or what inspired it?
Following the signs of the universe. Sometimes I sound like I'm woo-woo, but I feel like I'm woo. I'm a very
Just a little woo,
just a little woo.
just a touch.
And that's gonna come out right now when I answer this. So that's why I need to just put a little bit of disclaimer out there.
Great.
A lot of my clients are CEOs or senior executives or business owners. And so many of them this year in particular had been pointing me of like, Justine, you should go into corporate, you should go work with small business, startup businesses and such. And then putting that aside, be like, no, I'm good at this. I like what I do here. Like I haven't worked in corporate. I don't really feel like I belong there necessarily. I know that I'm effective in it with the people that I have worked with and that I have helped them in those dynamics. But I wasn't so sure about niching a business down in that direction. And I had crafted a whole new project. I was about to launch it. I put a ton of time into it. I was super excited around it. And then I met this woman who does human design. Have you ever heard of it?
Last episode we talked about human design.
Okay, great. So I'm very new to this. And she did human design for entrepreneurs. And she will look at your chart and she'll say what you're meant to do, who you're meant to serve, how you're meant to serve them, what is your message. And she knew the whole direction that I was about to go in. So I was like, I've done so many businesses and so many projects. I was like, and then, I retire them after 2 to 4 years. So I was like, before I take this next colossal effort, which will take me a couple of years to create and get going, I want to just, check on the site, have somebody look at it from the outside and see if it's aligned. So I thought it was perfect timing. At the end of the session, she said, Justine, your heart's in the right place with this project that you're meant to do or you want to do, but it is not what you're meant to do.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, you're not meant to have a community. You're meant to work with people who have communities and companies. And I was going to work with you, like your suburban couple. And she's like, you're meant to work with leaders, which are all my clients anyways. It's already the work that I'm doing. But she's like, that got me going. And then there were just several synchronicities that followed that. And a lot of stuff is pointing me in that direction. So I'm going to finish down this part of my business and then start getting creative in another one.
So what are the pain points that you're solving with this new business? What are you identifying as an ideal client profile? What problem?
Generally, I have people coming to me who have a lot of wealth and success in their life, but something feels like it's missing. And so then it's like taking wealth and making it and turning it into prosperity, and prosperity in all aspects of life, and making life more fulfilling and more aligned so that they're just not going through the motions. And it's not just about making money, but then like, why are you doing this? So making life more meaningful and more purposeful and more well-rounded as well.
And it's very difficult. Like I can relate to this. Like I've never really been motivated by money. It's not like one of my values that is like a motivator for me, although it's no different. Money's no different to me than a screwdriver. Like it's a tool.
Yeah.
But a screwdriver is not going to make me happy, nor is money. But it can be difficult to define what will make me happy. That has been a difficult pursuit for me because it's almost impossible to kind of to determine and define what is the meaning of life. And you get down these intellectual pursuits and you think about ethics and it's like, what is good and bad? Is there a universal, good and bad? Or is this something that I'm just defining? And then you get down these like, you're internally generating your external reality. And so if I can generate anything and accomplish anything, then what goal do I want to set and where do I want to spend my time if time is finite? So there's a lot of these questions that can be difficult to find the answer. So I'd be curious to hear from you, like what you would say would be a good, for my own personal interest, a good place to start on those things.
I mean, there's a couple things that you just said that I'd love to just to dive into conversation. Like you're like, if time is finite, because that's a fun conversation to have as well. For me, I always love starting with values. So I will take the different aspects of my life and I will elicit what are my values. So what are my top values in my relationship? What are my top values in my health and family, in my work? So sometimes I will break those down into different quadrants. And sometimes I will just do overall, like right now, what is the most important thing for me in my life? And I have a phenomenal values exercise. So
Let's do it. I'm ready.
I mean, it might take us a bit more of a moment, but you list out your top 10
Okay.
and then you put them in order of priority. And after that, this is my favorite part about it. And this is where sometimes the magic happens. Sometimes people like what they think is their priority is their priority. At least 50% of the time, if not 70% of the time, when we do this checks and balance, things change. And what it is you take the number 10 and you look at, does number 10 support number 9? Does number 9 support number 8? And if it doesn't, then you rearrange it and so that the one below supports the one above. And quite often, something that's lower down sometimes even moves up to become
Wow,
1.
that's very interesting.
It is so fascinating watching this happen. Like when I've done it for myself, I'm like, wow. And when I've done it for other people, I'll do it in relationships as well. So our values are such a close part of our identity. And this is what's determining everything else. Our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, everything comes from there. And also our values are our guiding light. And our values shift depending upon the different phase that we're going through in life. Like there's studies out there, a man in his 20s is going to have these values versus his 30s and his 40s and different for a woman. And so taking time to check in with your values when you're trying to figure out what's most important for you now. Like, what are you feeling ambitious about now at this point? What's most important for you? What do you want to pour your time and energy into? What's going to light you up? Because it's going to be different 10 years from now. And so I think values is one place to look at. And I think it can be helpful, especially if you're trying to figure out what's most important, to break it down into those different areas and to do the values exercise for each one of them and then pull them together.
And I've tried to like in my own, in for me personally, I've tried to define it like very broadly to at least get a direction, like a direction to head towards. And it's like for me, it's like, okay, my highest value is like I want to have a positive impact. So that at least gives me a direction. Now it's like, how do I execute a positive impact? Like, how do I have the biggest positive impact that is fulfilling my highest potential?
Yeah.
That can be a more difficult question, but
I mean, after I had this human design reading and what came out of that, I then geeked out. I went to ChatGPT
okay.
and I uploaded my human design chart to there. And I was like, well, wait a minute. If all this information is coming from human design, I was like, what if I throw astrology in there? So then I was like, okay, I also want you to act as a Vedic astrologer or Western astrologer. And I was like, what other modalities could I use? So I asked ChatGPT and it's like numerology and gene keys. I don't know anything about these things. So I was like, okay, what information do you need from me? And then I just started asking ChatGPT and I put together a little mini masterclass just because out of sheer enthusiasm of what I had this like beautiful love affair with ChatGPT for like a week. It was like, I loaded up all that information into ChatGPT and then I just started asking questions like, what is my mission? What is my purpose? What is the message I'm meant to deliver? And there's specific questions around the different modalities. Like for human design, it's your incarnation cross and sometimes like to deal with the Mercury or things like that. So I just got super excited around all this. I put it in a PDF and I made a class on it so that people could go and repeat it. And I repeated it with some friends and clients and it was so fascinating. There was a woman who was helping me. This wasn't her job, but I was trying to learn storytelling. And so she's like, oh, I'm pretty good at that. I can help you with it. And then when I did this whole process with ChatGPT and uploading the charts there for her incarnation cross, like one of her main things that she is meant to do is to help people through storytelling. Like it said it verbatim. And I was like, babe, this is your life mission.
Wow.
And the first time we worked together, I was like, what is it that you want to do? She's like, well, my ideal and my stretch would be to help entrepreneurs to find their stories and tell them. And I was like, why is that a stretch? You're phenomenal at it. And then a week later, we did this process and that was there. So when I went into it, part of the things that came up in my human design, one was to help people to revel in the intensity of desire and emotion. So I taught sacred sexuality for over a decade and I help people a lot with their emotions. And I'm like, well, that's been the last 20 years of my life. And so I think that I found a lot of help in the paid version of ChatGPT. It definitely gives a lot more clarity, but of going and looking at these things, like there's so much information there around what we're meant to do and when we're meant to do it. I've also gone to Vedic astrologers. I like that more than Western, where somebody had just gotten laid off or fired, or they quit, and they were trying to decide, should I go find another job? This is one of my clients, or should I start my own business? And the astrologer said, do not start your own business for the next year and a half. Wait till August. After that, you can do it. If you try to do it beforehand, you're not going to be successful. And that's exactly what ended up happening.
So I believe in like a lot of woo stuff, but I'm also very pragmatic. So I have to get to it through a pragmatic approach. And I find that a lot of like woo philosophies are more pragmatic and rational than their predecessors, or like things that are widely accepted as pragmatic. But as far as like human design and astrology, I have not crossed that bridge yet. And I'd be interested to hear from you, someone who you say, you take a pragmatic approach as well, how you came to like believing in those things. Like, I don't know anything about it.
Well, I lived in India for around a decade, on and off. I had a center there. So I would run it during high season. I had teachers run it for me the rest of the time. And there was a Vedic astrologer that I've worked with now since 2005.
What's Vedic? Is that just like an Eastern?
Yeah, like Eastern astrology. So there's Western astrology, which is more kind of personality stuff. I have very limited knowledge of astrology. I pay people. So like you're about to get all that I know.
Okay, no.
Vedic astrology, I feel, deals more with our karma. So like what is the past? What is your future? Like, and then I find it really helpful in navigating certain aspects of my business as well. Like there was one time when I had a horrible season with my center in India, and I was like, what's going on? Like, we've done so well. What happened this time? And I was just casually talking with my astrologer, and he was like, what day did you open the school this year? Because the whole town's closed for monsoon season. And I was like, oh, September 8th. And he is like, went and looked it up, and he's like, well, that's why. Anything that starts on this date at this point would have failed. So now whenever I go to run a program, I'm always checking my dates, or I'm going to open something, or if I was to buy a house, buy land, start a build, get married, like all of those things, big things, I always check the dates on, because I have seen that makes a difference.
Why is that influencing? Why are those?
You're going to have to get an astrologer on your podcast to answer that.
Okay.
I pay them to answer those questions for me.
Okay, interesting.
There's reasons behind it.
Okay.
I know a little bit, because I know some, just so I can go make some calculations on my own, but otherwise I get a session for them to calculate things for me.
Yeah, that's what I would like to understand, is like, what do they consider to be the like mechanisms behind why a date correlates to, or a moon phase correlates to, an outcome?
Oh, they're going to answer with all kinds of vocabulary that means nothing to you.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, like, I know nothing, but they're a nakshatra or dasha, or I don't know. There's terms out there that they have that are a part of the astrology science, that they're of things that they're looking at.
Do you think it's a gap in language? Why there's like, do you think it's kind of lost in translation? Like, articulating that from, in Indian language.
No, I think I just don't know those words.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I know the point of them.
Okay.
And I know what to look at for certain things. I just don't remember the terms.
Okay.
So no, I think some astrologers will be like, oh, your seventh house is conjunct to your, I don't know. There's all these kinds of words in there, and I don't know what that means, but I hear, and that means this.
Okay.
And I had, when I was in India, I would often get 20 to 50 readings done a season for people, because I just loved this guy so much, and he's a 20th generation astrologer. So I learned so much about what's in the charts and about people's karma and what's impacting them, whether it's their health or their relationships or their finances or their work or anything. And I just learned so much through that. So I'm a very strong believer in astrology, especially Vedic astrology. I'm not for like, oh, I'm an Aquarian, let me look up what an Aquarian is in a magazine and see what my fortune is for the week or for the month, because there's so much more to a chart that needs to be taken into consideration.
Interesting. Yeah, no, this is not a rabbit hole that I've entered yet, but you might have just opened the floodgates.
Oh, I will have So if anybody else is listening and you want recommendations of good astrologers, like I research these people a lot, and I'll go and have readings with anybody just to like get an experience of them. So I've got my favorites, so I'll definitely recommend them.
Yeah, sweet. And at the end, I'm gonna have you like plug all your stuff. So if anyone wants to hit you up, they can. Through this, and I only have a couple questions left. But through this like kind of entrepreneurial journey, what do you think is the biggest lesson that you've learned? So something that you know now that you didn't know when you started, that you wish you knew when you started, or like one piece of advice that you could give to the common man that would be beneficial to their life.
The common man or to entrepreneurs?
Let's start with the common man and then move to entrepreneurs. I want to ask both because this is a lot of your knowledge is, I think, applicable to all people.
Yeah. One, I would say I've been somebody who's just always gone after what I wanted. I've never had a job that I didn't like. And I think, and I've designed a life that has created the freedom to be able to do that. And so I would say to take the time to pause and figure out what it is that you want, what makes you happy, and to take the time to pause later on, 10 years down the line, if that still makes you happy, and to not be afraid to make commitments and choices. Because sometimes people are like, oh, but I don't know if I'm going to like this, or maybe that's going to be a wrong decision. Just act. Action is better than inaction. Progress over perfection. And so figure out what lights you up, go and do it. And then know that you can always shift gears. And if you're not good at shifting gears, then go get support to be able to do that. Because that's the whole thing that I work with people on. Are you good at starting stuff? Are you good at changing? Are you good at finishing? What are you not good at? And then we look at why. So there's like some temperaments and stuff behind that we can dig into. And so sometimes people don't commit, don't jump all in because they're afraid that they're making the wrong choice or it's not possible. And it is possible. Like you can make the things happen that you want to have happen. And I think whether that's not how it was done in your family, you don't see people around you doing it, then go watch movies of people doing it. Go watch, what is on with Will Smith around happiness? The Pursuit of Happiness. Such a great movie. I love movies like that, that are also based on a true story. Just like
triumph over adversity.
Yeah. What lights you up, and then go for it and just make it happen. And what does it look like to commit? And to do that, you also need to look at like, what are the fears behind it? And also to know that imposter syndrome is part of the process. If you're not experiencing imposter syndrome, you're probably not even pushing yourself. Not pushing yourself, but stretching yourself, like really going after something. Because even people who are undeniably successful, incredibly talented, they experience imposter syndrome. It's just part of the process. Just because you have the thoughts doesn't mean you need to believe them.
And would you give the same advice to existing entrepreneurs, or would you give a different?
Yeah. And just whatever comes up along the way. Like, I mean, I had run workshops where I have over 100 people. I've been lecturing and teaching for years. And then the first time I went online and I ran a master class, I'm online, I'm on video. Like it felt so much more, or like less personal in some ways. But I gave this first lecture, a free master class leading into my program. After I gave the lecture, I like broke down crying and went into a huge shame spiral. And I'm like, that was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. That was so bad. And my entrepreneur friends, they're like, oh, we've done that. We thought it was a really bad lecture, but it wasn't really that bad. It wasn't as bad as we thought. I'm like, I know that. I've been there. This one was bad. And I was like, cried probably for like 2 hours. And I was like, and I have to leave that recording up for 72 hours. What am I going to do? I'm so embarrassed. Once I got out of my shame spiral and I like did my work, I regulated, I did my own investigation. I went and looked, there was over 300 comments. There was over 100 people in the room. There were tons and tons of comments. People like, I've given up on master classes because there's never any takeaways. This one was so transformative. This was the best master class I've ever been to. And I was like, oh my God, I was really convinced that was horrible.
Yeah, like 90% of the things we worry about aren't even true, right?
I know. Yeah, so that was a really good experience to watch myself crumble so much, despite the experience and success that I had, despite the level of confidence that I have in myself, and to watch myself go into that.
Yeah, but you got through it, right?
Yeah, we always do. Put on your bootstraps and pull them up, or whatever they say. Final
question is, what is your definition of success? What are you chasing after?
I love that. That's something that I worked on a while back. It was just like, I have a whole list of things, which it's going to be way more poetic than what I'm going to be able to recall right now.
Both poems.
Like being able to do the hard things, to have the hard conversations, to stretch, to step outside of my comfort zone, to stretch my capacity for what it is that I think I'm capable of, and to learn that I'm capable of more after I fail, to stand up, back up and do it again. And to, I don't want to say to keep trying, because I think try is just kind of not the best word or vocabulary, but to figure out what I want and to go after it, and to constantly keep checking in and making sure that my life is in alignment with my heart and values.
Well, that's fantastic. I can see you're obviously on a unbelievable path, and you have collected a ton of knowledge that was extremely insightful to me and resonated with me. So I appreciate you coming on. If anyone else is like interested in asking you more questions or could benefit from your services, where could they find you?
I would say right now, find me on Instagram. That's probably the place where I'm more active, or go to my website and send an email. But Instagram is probably the easiest social platform to get a hold of me.
Okay, and what are those? What's your handle on Instagram?
Justine Baruch.
How do you spell that?
Justine, and then Baruch, Baruch.
And then your website?
JustineBaruch.com.
Okay, fantastic. I appreciate you so much coming on. It's been a pleasure. Again, very insightful, so I appreciate it.
Oh, great. I'm excited. Thank you. Your questions are really fun. I love this. And I also just being able to see your reactions around things. You're like, ooh, that works. Okay, that's valid in my relationship. It's so fun to see how these things that are like from the books, and a lot of it's from my experience as well, but to get to see them land for people, and especially when you guys both were like, yeah.
Yeah, no, and like I said, like genuinely, like we try to set a blank slate before you come in, like so that I don't, know a whole lot about you. And
Yeah.
all the questions that I ask were genuinely just evolved off, what you said before and like my actual intellectual interests in what you were saying. So
Yeah.
you kept me engaged for however long. We're definitely over close to an hour. So great job. Awesome episode.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.